Now here is the fourth video, and it's on phonological rules. This is going to be an introduction to the rule formalism on how to convert informal rule statements into formal notations. Now we're going to need a number of rule notations that we need to keep in mind all along as we go about transforming informal rules into these formal notations below. Now, the first symbol stands for C. It represents consonant. Then we have a vowel, and below that is a glide. The arrow is a symbol for the change. The slash separates the change from the context where the change takes place. And then we have the word boundary, and we use the word boundary in two positions. For word initial position, as you can see, and for word final position. And then we have morpheme boundary. This is separating two morphemes within the same word. Then we move on to the either or notation. This is a notation we use when we have a context that includes two possibilities. That is, the change can take place either in one context or in another context. The parenthesis notation is used to indicate optional segments. That is, the rule will take place whether that segment is there or not. The alpha notation is going to be used for uh, combining rules, and namely when we have the same feature value on both sides of the rule, or say both sides of the slash. And then the symbols for the syllable positions. Now the final position, then the penultimate syllable, and the anti-penultimate syllable. Phonological rules are formal notations that describe phonological processes. And since most phonological processes are context bound, that is, they can take place only in some contexts, we need a way to reveal this systematic relationship between the change and the context or the environment where it takes place. So there are three questions we need to answer in this respect. Question one is, what is it that changes? We need to describe the segment that changes using a feature matrix. B, how does this segment change? And here we mention, out of the features that we have in the feature matrix in A, we mention only the feature that has changed in B. In other words, to answer the question, how does it change? You need to have the arrow that relates A to B, and then on the right side of the arrow, we will mention only the feature that has changed. And C is, when does this change take place? In other words, we will draw a slash, and then after the slash, we specify the context where the change takes place. The rule formalism that we present below here is an answer to each of these questions. A typical rule would look like this. Each letter corresponds to one of the questions above. In other words, X is going to be what changes, Y represents how does it change, and Z represents when does the change take place. Now, X, as we mentioned before, is a feature matrix representing a segment or a sound. And this sound is the one that is going to be subject to change. Y represents the feature that is actually affected by the change. Example, if we have a voiced bilabial stop B, we will have the feature matrix containing plus consonantal, minus syllabic, etc. And then on the right side of the arrow, if we have B becoming P, then on the right side of the arrow, we will have just one feature that is voice, minus voice. So, and Z is the context where this change takes place. Now let's look at this in more detail. A rule that does not have the Z component, there is no context, we call that a context-free rule, while a rule with all three components, that is A, Y, and Z, is a context-bound rule. Here is an example of a context-free rule. In English, it's usually the case that any unstressed vowel is going to be reduced to a schwa. So this is how we're going to represent this rule. A vowel that is minus stress, that is unstressed, is reduced to a schwa. That's a low back spread lax vowel, the schwa, namely. Notice that we have no context. This happens all the time. Now, this rule is stating that all unstressed vowels become a schwa, regardless of any context. In other words, it is not dependent on any special context. Now, as an example of a context-bound rule, we look at this rule here. A stop is devoiced, becomes voiceless, in word final position. That's how we're going to represent the rule. The stop represented by the feature matrix, minus sonorant, minus continued, plus voice. On the right side of the arrow, as we said, we mention only the feature that has changed. It becomes voiceless. And then the slash that separates the change from the context on the right side of the slash. Now the context, if you go back to your rule notations, this context means word final position. So this rule is saying a stop is devoiced or becomes voiceless in word final position. Well, now we're going to pick up the phonological processes that we have seen in the last two videos, that is on assimilation and syllable structure processes. And we're going to transform those processes into formal rules. Let's begin with assimilation. We pick up the example, the English plural S, and of course you remember that it takes two forms, a voiced form and a voiceless form, as you can see. Now the voiced form occurs after vowels, after glides, after liquids, nasals, and voiced stops. The voiceless form occurs uniquely and exclusively after voiceless stops. In other words, we have no difficulty deciding which one is going to be the basic form, that is the one with the larger distribution, and so it's the voiced form that is going to be on the left side of the arrow. So since the variant Z has a larger distribution than S, so Z is going to be on the left side of the arrow. That's the basic form. And to the right of the arrow, we're going to have the voiceless form, the derived form. So we mention only, remember again, I'm stressing this again and again, we mention only the feature that needs to be changed to get the variant S. Look at the rule. That's the feature matrix representing Z minus sonant plus continuant plus interior plus coronal plus strident plus voice. That's the sound Z. What changes so that Z becomes S? On the right side of the arrow, we have minus voice. And of course, this happens in a specific context. That is when the last sound of a noun is voiceless. This happens when the last sound of a noun is voiceless, right? So that's the, 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 the consonant, the feature matrix here, represents the last sound in the word. And then we have the morpheme boundary, and then the environment for the plural S. And finally, the word boundary. So that's where the plural S occurs. And it is preceded by a consonant, which is minus sonant, minus continuant, minus voice. In other words, the rule is saying the voiced plural form becomes voiceless when it is preceded by a voiceless stop. Now we move to consonant deletion, and we pick up an example from French. Remember, the consonant deletion rule in French requires two conditions. First condition is the consonant to be deleted has to be in word final position. And next is the following word must begin with a vowel. In other words, this is what we should contain in our environment. Notice the word final position symbol is followed by the symbol C to indicate that the next word begins with a consonant. So the rule is saying a consonant is deleted in this context. Now, what's the context? The consonant is in word final position. That's the word final position symbol. And then we have another consonant after the word boundary symbol to indicate that the next word begins with a consonant. In other words, this rule will not delete the consonant if the next word begins with a vowel. Now, vowel deletion in تشلحيت, remember how the possessive pronoun inu in تشلحيت loses the vowel E, that's the initial vowel, when it follows a noun ending with a vowel. Look at the examples. Afus inu, afus inu, and agayu inu. No, it should be agayunu. And of course, the vowel is dropped because the preceding word ends with a vowel. So that's the rule. A vowel is deleted if it is in word's initial position and preceded by another vowel. So that's the vowel E. It is in word's initial position and it is preceded by another vowel. We move on to insertion rules. Glide insertion in تجليد, if you remember, we insert a glide to separate a word's final vowel from the vowel of the following demonstrative pronoun. In other words, when we end up having two vowels, we insert a glide to break up the vowel cluster. Look at the examples. تزويت ed, تزويتد, and easy yed, easy ed. And of course, we insert the glide y to separate the two vowels. So the glide is inserted right there. Insert this glide. Look at this symbol for insertion. It's the reverse of deletion. We insert the glide minus consonantal minus syllabic plus sonorant minus back minus round. That's the glide y in this position. In word's initial position to separate two vowels. Vowel and consonant coalescence. That is, this is a rule that merges two segments into one. We will pick up the example we have seen of the French nasalization rule. This rule makes use of subscripts, that is, numbers that we put under each segment to indicate the order of the segments. Look, for example, we have a low vowel followed by a nasal in word final position. So we have three items here, and we will indicate that by putting subscripts like this. The low vowel comes first, the consonant comes second, and then the word final position is next, is third. Now, what happens is the low vowel and the nasal consonant will merge into one single segment, and this will give us the following results. The vowel becomes plus low plus nasal, and the nasal is dropped, and this happens in word final position. So this kind of rule is one simple way of indicating how two sounds coalesce or merge into one single sound. You may need to go back to phonological processes in the previous videos to look at the data that represents that this rule represents. The major class change. Remember, we have three major classes: consonants, vowels, and glides. A high vowel becomes a glide. That is one major, it moves from one major class to another major class. A high vowel, E or U, becomes the corresponding glide. This means that E becomes Y and U becomes W when followed by another vowel. Remember, the symbol V stands for minus consonantal plus syllabic. So if we say a high vowel becomes minus syllabic, the feature syllabic is actually included in the symbol V, which is plus minus consonantal plus syllabic. It becomes minus syllabic when it is followed by another vowel. This indicates a situation where two contiguous vowels, the first of which becomes a glide because it's followed by another vowel. Now, neutralization, this is a process that, if you remember, that we pick up from German, the voiced obstruents become voiceless in word final position. Now, here is the rule. Obstruents are plus consonantal minus syllabic, that's represented by the symbol C, and then minus sonorant, that's obstruents, including stops, fricatives, and affricates. And all these obstruents are voiced. So a voiced obstruent becomes voiceless in word final position. Now we move on to rule combining. This is a notation that we use to combine, remember, two rules where a change happens in one context or in another. In other words, this is an either or situation. The brace notation is used to describe an either or situation. As an example, consider the light L, as in words like lip, flap, love, million, and the dark L, as in words like hill, silk, wheel, hold. The light L is alveolar, hence plus anterior, and the dark L is post-alveolar, or let's say palatal-alveolar. Therefore, it's going to be represented as the feature minus anterior. And we're going to look at the rule. The rule says the light L becomes dark if it is in word final position, as in pill and call, or followed by a consonant, as in silk and help. So these, in fact, are two rules. But the formal rule will combine both rules into one context by using the brace notation. Look at the brace notation on the right side of the rule. It says this happens before a consonant or in word final position. So the rule says that the light lateral liquid becomes dark in two contexts. The parentheses notation is another way of combining rules, and it's used to indicate that a segment or an item is optional in a rule. That is, it could be there or not. Stress in French falls on the final vowel of a word. Example, matin, stylo, musée, banal, mignon, décor, rencard. The rule would look like this. Stress a vowel. A vowel is stressed when it is in word final position. The C0 that you see there in the context, this means zero or more consonants. That is, we use this notation when the number of consonants is irrelevant to the rule. In other words, we could have no consonant, or one consonant, or three or more consonants. However, when a word ends in a schwa vowel, this rule still applies. In other words, it is the preceding vowel which is stressed. Look, vowel is stressed if it is in this position, and in the final position we have a schwa. So if you look at this, the rule will apply whether there is a schwa as in 12 or no schwa as in 11, which means that the schwa element or segment is optional. we have two different rules for one process. So here the generalization is that the final schwa is optional. So we do this to combine the two rules 11 and 12. This shows that the schwa could be there or not there because we put it between parentheses. So now the rule is formalized in such a way as to allow for the presence or absence of a final schwa in the French stress rule. Rule 13 then combines Rule 11 and 12. The alpha notation. The alpha notation is one way of representing or saying that the feature value, whether positive or negative, on the left side of the rule is the same value on the right side of the rule. Let's take an example. A vowel is round if the suffix vowel is round. That is, the stem vowel is plus round if the suffix vowel is round. It is minus round if the suffix vowel is minus round. Look at this. Vowel becomes plus round if it is in this position, and then we have a morpheme boundary, and then after the morpheme boundary we have the suffix vowel, which is plus round. So this rule is saying the stem vowel becomes plus round if the suffix vowel is plus round. Rule 15 is saying that the vowel becomes minus round if the suffix vowel is minus round. Now here we have two rules, and yet it's the same process. We need to combine these two rules into one to reveal that this process is actually just the same. The alpha notation is one way of saying that whatever the value of the feature is on the right side of the slash, it is going to have the same value on the left side of the slash. So we can combine the two rules as follows. Vowel becomes alpha round. So alpha stands for plus or minus. If it is in this position and the suffix vowel is alpha round, this rule is stating that if round is plus, it is plus on both sides. If it is minus, it's minus on both sides. So the alveolar, we'll take another example. The alveolar strident fricative suffix s, z becomes voiceless when preceded by a voiceless consonant and voiced when preceded by a voiced consonant. We'll represent this rule like this. Minus sonorant. Let's remember C stands for plus consonantal minus syllabic. Then we have minus sonorant plus continuum plus anterior plus coronal plus strident. And then it will become plus voice if the preceding consonant is plus voice. That's the context. Minus voice if the preceding consonant is minus voice. So alpha stands for plus in both cases, in both situations, or minus in both.